Hey everyone, today we're going to look at the solution for Workout Wednesday week 37. Just as a recap, what we're doing is looking at percent of change year over year for subscriptions by state. And then within the tooltip for each state, we can look at the year over year comparison. That's going to start on whatever weekday the first date in the filtered range is, so whether that's a Sunday or a Tuesday or a Friday, and then it's only going to show complete week, so it's not going to drop off at the end if there's only 2 days of a week for that last week. And then we're also going to look at the percent of total subs with the circle sized, just so that we can get a gauge of how many subs we have in each of the states at a glance. So let's jump in. In the data, we start with state, subscription date, and subscription. And what we want to do is just start with the map. So we'll double click on latitude and longitude, add state to the detail, and create a filled map. Then I want to look at the sum of subscriptions. But I want that to be with the year over year comparison. So first I'm going to look at the subscription date and compare it to today and see what that looks like. We'll call this current prior year. So if the year of the subscription date equals the year of today, then call it current. Otherwise, call it previous. When we do that, we can add that up here and we get a current number, for example, California 20,652, and a previous of 31,240. Then what we can do is we can turn this into a table calculation of percent difference, and that's going to default to calculate on the state. But we don't want that to calculate on the state. We want to calculate it by current prior year. And that's great, but then it looks like it's calculating from current to previous, and we want it to do the other way around. So we can go into the sort order, change it to descending, and that gets us from previous to current. There are a few other solutions that I've seen come out this week where it's just they've calculated a current year and then they've calculated a prior year. We ended up, when we were building this, doing a table calculation based on what we're building here. So that's how we're doing it, but there are other ways of solving this same issue. So then with that, I can't just exclude this previous if I want it to go away, because then I don't have anything to compare to. But what I can do is I can hide the previous, and then I get to keep my current, and then I can just uncheck the show header, and I have what I need. Now, this isn't what the final map looks like, because we need to get a date grain. We'll need to be able to filter this with, as we look, we have January 1st through July 15th. I have 2019 and 2020 data here. The requirements talked about today being July 15th. So I have my parameter that I've already created that has July 15th there. But then I need to create this date grain calculation, which I'll do. So in order to create a consistent date between the 2019 and the 2020 data, and this will actually come in handy when we're building the tooltip, I took the month date part of subscription date, and and then the day date part of the subscription date and added that to the year of today. This should probably be the parameter today, but that'll be the same thing in this case. So I just call this date grain. So I created a date from those strings and built that together. You can also use make date here for that same purpose. So if I create that date grain, pull it onto filters, go to individual dates and condition, then I can say date grain is less than or equal to today, and that gives me the general map that we saw in the example. So we have that piece in place. Next, we can start looking at getting the size, the circles on. So in order to do that, I can just control drag longitude over, right click and dual axis, and then on my second piece, I can take that piece off and move sum of subscriptions to size and set it to circle. And then we can set the color to black, and we have our circles. And then I can play around with the size a little bit to get it to be a little bigger. So that's the key piece of our map. So this doesn't quite look like what we have in the end result, but we do need to get some date grain filtering in place. So we'll start with a range of dates, and this is just going to give us, right now it's showing through December 31st, and that will change shortly, but we want this to be by day. And then when we show that, we get our slider, which right now gives us January to December. Then if we pull in date grid again, and we do individual dates and go to condition, then we can say date grain is less than or equal to today. And then that looks more like what we would expect. But we're still getting this filter going out to December 31st, and we don't want that to go out that far. But if we can add this date grain less than today to the context, and then come over to this card and say all values in context, then that switches there to January 1st to July 15th. And that's great. In order to get rid of the year, we can just do a quick date format, call it month, 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 day, day. And now we have January 1st to July 15th. So we're kind of done with this part. Now we need to start on the tooltip. I'm just going to duplicate this to give me the filters that are still in place. And in this case, what we want is we want our date grain on a weekly basis with our sum of subscriptions over time, but then we want that by the current and prior year. So overall, this is what we're going to be looking for. However, the requirements show that when we have more than 30 days, we need a weekly grain. When we have less than 30 days, we need a daily grain. And when we're on that weekly grain, we need it to start on the weekday that it starts. So in this case, January 1st is what we want to be the first start date. But if we look at the chart, it's December 29th. And so you can see there's this drop off at the beginning, or a spike. You're going from an incomplete week to a complete week. And then at the end, we're going from a complete week to an incomplete week. And so it looks like we were doing poorly and then we jumped up, and then at the end we're doing okay and then we fall off the cliff. And that's what we're trying to avoid with the tooltip tricks that we're doing here in this challenge. So first we'll start at the beginning and get us on the right weekday of start of the week. So in order to do that, first we need to figure out what the first weekday is of this data set. And in this case, I'm just looking at getting a fixed minimum of the date grain value, and then telling it that I want the date name of the weekday. Now if I do that, and I just throw that on label to tell me what it is, that gives me Wednesday, because based on the value there, it's going to give me Wednesday. Now if I pull February 12th out, which is I picked Wednesday. If I do February 14th, it's a Friday, but it still says Wednesday. And what that means is we need to move this date grain also to the context, and you see that switch to Friday. So the fixed calculation is happening before the date grain filter was happening. So we have to move it to the context so it happens before the fixed calculation. So once we have that, then we need to say the start date of the week and I'm doing a lot of copying and pasting just so that you don't have to sit and watch me type. So one of the things that I found was when you use a date trunk calculation on the week, you have the ability to specify the start of the week. And so I thought it would be great to just say date trunk followed by week, then the date grain, and then just throw the first weekday calculation here. But that gives me an error that says the third argument to date trunk must be a string literal. Why that's the case, I don't understand. But it is, and so that's why I came up with this case statement. So instead of just inserting into the date trunk, I said, okay, use the case on the first weekday. When Sunday, then start the week on Sunday. When it's Monday, start the week on Monday, and so on. And then just made sure that that was a date. So this is our week start. So now we have the week start. And so then we need this to be in the date grain instead of the original date grain that we're using for our filtered values. So then we'll come in here. So because we're looking at if it's less than 30 days in the view, give me a daily grain. We want that regular date grain. And then if it's more than 30 days, we want the weekly date grain. I used an if and only if statement. I found that recently to be a cleaner version of if statement. So you have if the date diff by day of the minimum date grain fixed LOD and the maximum of the date grain fixed LOD, and because we have the date grain in the context, we're going to get whatever is filtered. If that's less than 30, then give me the date grain, which will be by day. Otherwise, give me the week start that we just created. So once I do that and pull it out here and say I want it by day, now we have something where the beginning looks fine. As I change the date, I'm always starting with the beginning date that's set in my filter. If I switch this to be less than 30 days, then I get a daily view. So that part's working as well. And then the last piece is we need to figure out how to exclude the end. So in this case, January 1st is a Wednesday and July 11th is a Saturday. And so this week of July 8th only has Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So it looks like it falls off the cliff. There are also a few different ways to do this that I saw from the solutions this week. But what I ended up doing was kind of silly when I look at it, but oh, and I forgot one other piece. So one other item that we're going to need is calling out in the tooltip whether it's a weekly or a daily. So I just call this the tooltip name. And so this is the same as the date grain tooltip, just instead of telling it which date value to use, it just calls it out as daily or weekly. So now that I do that, now my calculation has the date grain tooltip name. So in this case, when that date grain tooltip name is weekly, then this is the same calculation that I had for the week start. So it's finding the start of the week for the given value, the given record, and then comparing that to the start of the week for the max date. So in this case, July 11th. So this bottom half of the calculation is going to return July 8th, which is the start of the week of the max date in this case. And so I don't want any values that have the start of the week as July 8th to show up. So I'm doing that Boolean comparison to not equal that last week. Else true for the dailies, so if it's not weekly, then it's daily, and I want whatever's in the view for that. And then we'll call this our all weeks excluding incomplete. So now once we throw this on and call out true, we notice that that last date disappeared and now we only go through July 1st instead of July 8th. So now we have a much better picture in this weekly view, and we don't panic when we look at the most recent week and think, oh no, like it dropped off the cliff. No, we're incomplete weeks. Quick change to the colors. Get those to match. Okay. So now when we come back to our map, if we go into the tooltip, we don't want the current prior year. We do want the state, and we'll make that a little bigger. Call it 16. We do want the percent year over year, so we'll call that percent change year over year. And then we also want to show the current year value and the prior year value to be able to compare and see what that looks like. And we'll get to that piece in a second. So we can insert, we're going to add the map 2 sheet, which we'll rename to the other, and we'll filter this on state. So now as I hover, I get that view with state. So we'll change this to tooltip. We'll clean up the axis. Get our grid lines. And our axis rulers. Okay. The other thing that we need is a label on the end of these. So we just want labels, line ends. We can have them match the mark color. We'll make it a little bigger and bolder so that we can see them. Now when we go back to the map, we have that view. So we do need the current year subscriptions and the prior year subscriptions. So in order to do that, because we're in the current year, I can just bring the current subscriptions into the tooltip. And when I add those in, I get that 20,269 that I would expect. But then I also need the prior year subscriptions. So what I did with that is I just did a lookup, which is basically what this percent difference is using in the first place. So I'm doing a lookup on the sum of subscription for the row prior, which in this case is the previous year. And we'll have to edit the calculation to get that to do what we want. Because right now, if we pull it into the tooltip and add it in, we're not going to get anything. But if we edit the table calculation, tell it we want it to be by, not by state, by current prior year, and then we sort it on current prior year descending. Now if I hover, I get an actual prior year number. So we'll do a little formatting. Throw in current year, prior year, percent change year over year. Center that. Make it a little bigger. Make these bold. And the right color. bold as well. And then I kind of want this to be a little bigger. It's not very big here in this case. So then we can change our max width to maybe 500 and our max height to 400. Let's see what that looks like. That looks a little better. Then we can clean up our percentage of total. Helps if you do it in the right section. Okay, and then so the other piece then, we're just going to take this whole thing and we're going to paste it into this tooltip. But then instead of the percent change year over year, what we want to show here is the percent of total. So what we'll do there is we have our sum of subscription. And I want to add that, and we'll just do a quick table calculation of percent of total. And we'll verify that that's running on state, which it is. And so we come into tooltip, change that percent difference to percent of total. Make that bold. So now we have our percent of total. So there we go. Now as we drop these into dashboard, we can clean up the map. We want this to apply to make sure that it applies to all of the worksheets. So we'll make sure that we add it to the context and apply it to also happen on the tooltip. So from here, it's just formatting and getting it into the overall dashboard view. I didn't like the size legend, but I did want to identify that there's this circle that has a number of subs. And it looks like I'm missing something in this tooltip of using the wrong value. We'll just make sure that we fix that. So I want to just get this number of subs with a circle. So what I did there is I just came up to columns, typed in a number of subs text string, hide the field labels, then I'm going to add a min 0.0 to size. Change that to a circle, throw it into entire view, get rid of our row dividers, make it black, turn it down a little bit, and then as we add it to the dashboard, I'm just going to throw in a vertical get this down here, add my horizontal with my filter and my legend, and then I'll add sheet 3 in here, hide the title, there's my number of subs with the circle. We'll get rid of everything over there, and then all I need is my title of wow 37 and find the year over year trend. And then we can play around with the sizing of everything. And the overall size needed to be a little different. Okay. So there it is. We have our states. We have our dynamic tooltip adjusting to whatever day is happening. We have the tooltip adjusting based on the number of days that we have so that it can show daily or weekly. And we're all set. Thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed this week's challenge.